Let's be honest, tuning in Forza Horizon 5 can be kinda intimidating at first. There's so many menus to mess with, there's so many sliders, and it's not always clear what actually makes your car faster or, yeah, better to drive. But once you know a few general rules and tricks, it's actually easier than it looks. Welcome back everybody, I'm your favorite German potato, and like in my previous tuning tutorial, I'm going to dive very deep into upgrading and tuning so that you'll be able to set up your car to perfection by the end of the video. Today we're focusing on a rear-wheel drive car which is made for all-round and handling purposes, the Honda NSX-R from 1992, which was tuned in collaboration with my good friend Let's, one of the best players in Forza Horizon 5. If you want to see more elaborate content like this, definitely like and subscribe and let me know in the comments which other cars you want to see in future tuning tutorials. Let's go. So, first things first. Always check the conversions tab to see if there are any interesting engine or drivetrain swaps. These choices can open up completely different upgrade paths later. Now, here's also something you need to know. Forza's PI system actually favors some of these swaps. That means certain engines end up way more valuable than the stock one or even other swaps. This happens because the game kind of misinterprets the power band. In most cases it doesn't know the best time to shift, so it doesn't really reflect the true strength of each engine. For our car we've got three options: the BMW i6, the LS3 V8 and the Turbo Ready. With the i6 our NSX gets more horsepower and even loses some weight, as you can see. The V8 even gives us more horsepower but also adds more weight. And the Turbo Rally has the least horsepower, so we're dropping it in our case. So it's between the i6 and the V8 now, and for A-Class we're definitely going with the i6 because it gives us the best power to weight ratio. Now if we were tuning this into S1 we'd pick the VA instead. With the V8 you can also throw on the centrifugal supercharger and that combo is basically insane in S1 class. But for A-Class it's way too much power when we want some kind of handling heavy all-round build. So since this video focuses on rear-wheel drive, we don't really need to talk too much about drivetrain swaps in this case. Still, just so you know, the RWD swap here takes 11 PI. You'd only install that if you're going for a full handling focused A-Class NSX, and which is actually the meta in this class. So it's basically the best pure handling car in A-Class. Next up, aspiration upgrades. In our case it's easy, you know, we've only got the single turbo option and yeah, we're definitely installing that. Rule of thumb, most of the time you want to add aspiration upgrades because they're simply better than stock. And installing one also opens up more engine options later, which you will definitely see when we get to the engine category. Simultaneously, I'd like to use this opportunity to also share some kind of leaderboard with you in terms of the best aspirations. So, number one definitely is our lovely, already mentioned centrifugal supercharger. The twin and single turbos would be a shared second position, so there it always depends on the car. And on fourth then we would have the supercharger. Finally, body kits. Some cars offer them, but in our case it just adds too much grip and drag. So you only really use body kits for pure full handling builds like the all-wheel drive NSX handling meta build that I just mentioned before. And yeah, since we're looking for an all-round car in our case, we don't need it. Let's head to tires and rims, basically the backbone of your mechanical grip. Step 1, check your compound. The options are almost endless here, but for an A-Class all-rounder like this, you usually want to pick between rally tires or drift tires. The NSX stock tires are pretty bad. They're somewhere between vintage and street tires, so definitely worse than these two. Both compounds, rally and drift, feature comparatively good corner speed, but the drift tires have little less traction out of low speed areas. And since the difference in PI is only 1, in our case we go for the better grip, go for rally tires. In other cars the PI gap between these two may be a bit bigger, and then you sometimes go for drift tires, because later you could then invest these PI into much more engine parts or something else. And obviously slicks would give you the best grip, but they cost way too much PI and push us almost to the class limit, which is definitely not worth in our case. Again, in a full handling all-wheel drive build you take slicks actually, but then you die on straights because you couldn't afford any power upgrades. Front tire width? Skip it. Costs PI and barely helps. Unless you're running some insane power build that struggles to hit lateral Gs. Here it could help. The rear tire width, however, is always worth it. It only costs a few PI and gives you way better traction and stability. That's an easy pick. For now we're leaving this section, might come back later for a few final touches, but let's go to aero and appearance. It's an easy one for the performance, but not for your eyes. Don't we all love the beautiful Forza aero? If you want to make your all-round build competitive, you have to install both front and rear wing. In the case of the rear wing, we actually have two options. The normal Forza Aero and the Rocket Bunny rear wing, which would also come with the kit I showed before. They feature the same downforce characteristics and adjustable options. However, the Rocket Bunny is 2 kg lighter, which means we should go with it. But in my opinion, alone it looks so weird. Even worse than the Forza Aero, so I'm not going with it here. But really, from a performance perspective, if you're searching for the last thousandth of a second, you should definitely go with the Rocket Bunny option. After this little optical shock, we are heading over to the drivetrain, and the first thing you want to do is to upgrade your differential. You always have to install it because you can now fine-tune your differential settings in the tuning menu, which is a very vital part of your setup. Besides, it doesn't take any PI, so definitely don't hesitate to install it. We can decide whether we want to use the race, drift or off-road diff. And interestingly, which is something I already shared previously, we're going with the rally diff, which in most cases is the best choice for rear-wheel drive cars as well, because of the smoother transition from grip to oversteer. You basically never use the race diff because there's no smooth transition at all, and it almost acts like slip angle doesn't exist. For the time being, that's it for the drivetrain, and we are checking platform and handling, where we definitely have a few options. The first thing you always want to do is to install both anti-roll bars to be able to fine-tune them in the next section. They almost cost no PI, get them. Next up are springs and dampers, which you want to install to be able to fine-tune stuff like your ride height, your rebound and bound stiffness, as well as the whole alignment section. The NSX largely benefits from off-road springs and dampers. Yes, it sounds weird, but again, this is Forza. They will give you the option to increase your maximum ride height tremendously and make the springs slightly softer than the race version. And in general, this is to say, all NSX cars are pretty stiff and hence benefit from these softer settings to also improve the general rotation of the car. And also, by the way, drift springs and dampers are something you can always ignore. It's only between race and off-road, depending on which car you're choosing. And we're finalizing the platform and handling section here by calling Weight Watchers since we want to lose weight. Rule of thumb here, always install the race weight reduction when you can, since lighter is always better in the game. It's one of the most PI efficient upgrades and helps you to accelerate better and improves your handling. One of the easiest picks. So, we still have a few PI to spend to make our car a bit more powerful, because at the moment it would definitely lack speed. But at the same time we also can't spend too much. Before we check our specific case, I'd like to share a few general rules with you though. The strongest engine upgrades you can basically get are the exhaust, your case-specific aspiration, followed by the fuel system, intake manifold if it's available, or the camshaft depending on the car. Something that should always come last is the intercooler, as it also increases your weight. So only install it when you really need the extra power. Additionally, in a few cars, especially in smaller ones, it can also shift your weight distribution. This is actually how we made the 211 work in S1 class. Definitely check the link in the description for that video. Another part you always check last would be the flywheel, since there are way more efficient ways to optimize your build eventually, such as the driveline, something you will also see in our process. And all of that means that for the NSX, we're certainly heading towards our aspiration, the single turbo, and get the race version of it. But that means that we won't be able to fit the exhaust as we're already at the limit, unfortunately. The only thing that still fits is the sport intake. It's not super strong, but definitely better than nothing, with 8 more horsepower and 1 kilogram less. And we only installed the intake since we know that with a few last touches, we will definitely get back some PI. As at the moment we're at S1 802 and we need to be at A 800. So let's get back to drivetrain and check the transmission. In most cases it can already be sufficient to only use the street or sport transmission, because the race transmission mostly takes too much PI, also in this case as you can see. With the sport transmission you won't be able to fine-tune every single gear, however taking care of the final drive mostly already does the job. This is always a case-by-case decision. In some cars you can regain PI with certain transmissions, in some you can't. Definitely always keep your eyes open for a few extra PI. So let's install it and head back to tires, because now we actually have to make our car even uglier. Changing the rim style and rim size are two settings which mostly help you to regain some PI. In our case though, we won't change anything in regards to the rim style. We're completely focusing on the size. Here we see that increasing the rear rim size will help us to lower our PI, but by also increasing our weight slightly. There's no actual benefit in regards to the drivability though, so we only do it for the stats. At the same time, we see that the front size would increase our PI, so let's move on. Eventually, we want to check out if we really squeezed out everything. When it comes to our PI, go to drivetrain and check the driveline. By installing said driveline, your car can lose some extra weight, but obviously also increases the PI slightly. But the street driveline still fits into our car as we can see, so let's get it. And generally speaking, the driveline is an upgrade you always want to check at the end of the building process to finalize everything. Hello guys! How do you like it so far? Let me know in the comments and definitely smash that like button, don't forget it. And now let's move on with the fine-tuning section. In the tires tab, you can adjust your front and rear tire pressures as you can see. As I already mentioned in my last tuning tutorial, different tire compounds in Forza Horizon 5 favor different pressures. However, generally you want the tire pressure lower on the axle that takes most of the load, or at least balanced settings. With ready tires you can go pretty soft compared to other compounds. Usually somewhere around 1.5 to 1.6 bar or roughly 21 to high 23 psi. Again, I'm sharing a quick overview of all the ideal tire pressures. Since the NSX is a pretty balanced car, we're using 1.6 for both axles. And to be very precise, it's 7 clicks from the last 1.5 value. The respective PSI values can be seen now. Remember, when we installed our upgrades, we also got the Sport transmission, which means we can now tweak the final drive. If you lower the final drive, you get longer gears and a higher theoretical top speed, but slower acceleration. In general, you want your gearbox as short as possible and as long as needed for a balanced all-round build like this. Our engine swap produces most of its power near the rev limiter, so don't shift too early. Tune the final drive so you're always using the full power band, especially when accelerating out of corners. We've slightly decreased this value to 3.83 to get a bit more top speed. And just to mention, these settings don't exist in a vacuum. They should always align with your aero setup, which we'll cover soon. Camber basically ensures the best possible contact in corners. You generally want more front camber than rear, since the front does the steering. In my previous tutorial, I already showed how to use telemetry and tire temperatures to find your perfect values here. Please check that out if you want the full process, because I don't want to repeat that again. To simplify it here, reducing front camber slows turn and response. Reducing rear camber increases traction out of slow corners but can cause instability in longer, faster turns. And most setups fall between -1.0 and 0. For the NSX we're running 0.5 front and 0.3 rear. That gives us a bit more ground contact at lower speeds, improving grip compared to the base setup. Toe settings are something you should tweak at the very end of your tuning process. It's kind of your last resort. If your car still understeers, try increasing the front toe by 0.1 or 0.2. If you decrease rear toe, you get more rear instability. However, in our case we didn't need to adjust anything here, so we kept both stock. The caster affects straight line stability and how fast the car straightens after turning. A positive front caster enhances cornering by optimizing the tire's contact patch with the road for better grip. Decreasing the front caster, on the other hand, can be a very aggressive way to get a better turn-in reaction in cars that simply don't want to turn. But usually 6.5 to 7.0 is the sweet spot here, and for our NSX we definitely went with 7.0. Anti-roll bars are probably the most important setting when it comes to mid-corner purposes. You can basically say the softer your roll bar, the more grip for your car. But that also means that it possibly turns worse mid-corner, so that you shouldn't always run super soft roll bars for both settings, as your car will suffer from serious understeer. Remember, we didn't install a wider front tire but the widest rear tires. Due to that, our car already features very good grip. That's why we should definitely start with 165, just like with most cars in the game. If you notice your car is oversteering too much, reduce the rear anti-roll bar or increase the front one to find your sweet spot. Something like 565 could already make the car more stable if you have problems controlling it. However, I go with 165 for now, as it's perfect for this NSX. Spring stiffness controls how the car transfers weight during acceleration, braking and cornering. If your car oversteers or struggles with traction out of turns, stiffen the front and soften the rear. If it understeers, do the opposite. Simultaneously, you have to know that your spring setup should always match your weight distribution. Because our NSX has more weight in the back, since it has a weight distribution of 45%, the rear springs should be stiffer than the front ones. Overall, comparatively soft settings are the way to go. Our off-road chassis definitely helps in terms of that. We're going with 60 at the front and max out the rear with 109.5. If these settings are too extreme for you and you feel the car is some kind of snappy and low and mid corner situations, I'd recommend lowering the rear settings. Maybe try 95 there and check if that's already better. If not, decrease it more. In terms of the ride height, you see here that we're using the highest front value for the best possible response when turning in. With the highest possible at the back, we ensure some more stability. If we lowered this, we would exchange some of that lovely stability for a bit more top speed and slightly better rotation. But this doesn't work with every car, because not all cars feature the stability and downforce needed for that. And as you can see, we also went with the safety first version in our case. Your dampers work hand in hand with your springs, so the two definitely have to complement each other. Generally, you keep your rebounds around the middle range and your bump settings fairly low. We're using 9.0 for the front and 12.5 for the rear in terms of our rebound, which definitely matches our weight balance and spring stiffness. In case of the bump settings, however, we increased them to 3.1 and 3.7 because the higher rear bump gives us some more initial rotation. Simultaneously, the car is a bit more stable while accelerating. Our settings definitely lead to, let's say a nice performance in low speed corners while still maintaining enough speed through mid speed corners. Also a little rule of thumb for all of you. Before you try extreme settings in regards to your damping settings to counter a few driving characteristics, tweak your springs first. In terms of damping, we're always a fan of pretty conservative values here. In most cases in all-round cars, you definitely want to go with maximum downforce at the front to reach the highest possible corner speed in high-speed turns. And it's no different this time. The rear wing needs to be adjusted accordingly to reach maximum stability. If this is too low, you have oversteer, and if it's too high, you'll have understeer. And there are still a few cases where you can completely decrease the rear aero, but it's not as regular as it used to be in Forza Horizon 4. That's something I also said last time already. In the case of the NSX, however, I still went with the lowest possible value. If you think this is too unstable in high and mid-speed corners, definitely feel free to increase this value slightly. It's not uncommon that rear-wheel drive cars require a bit more rear aero, so definitely don't hesitate to increase this value, especially in quicker cars than the NSX. The rule of thumb in this case could be that you should rather go with a bit too much rear aero and not too little. Power builds, for example, mostly have full aero on both. And always remember, your gearing should be tuned accordingly to your aero settings. Brakes? We don't need brakes. The differential allows your tires to rotate at different speeds, and since we installed the rally diff, it gives a smoother transition between grip and slide. So let's start with acceleration. The higher this value, the more aggressive your car reacts to throttle input out of corners. For all-round or handling heavy rear-wheel drive builds like the NSX, you usually max this out at 100. After testing a few laps though, the car felt a bit too reactive to me, so I dropped this to 90 actually in this case, which made it much smoother and more fun in my opinion. For deceleration, it's basically the opposite. Lower values mean more rotation when you lift off or brake. You should always start at 0 and then make small adjustments. In our case, I felt some aggressive behavior and therefore went with 5. With these two values, I ensured that the car is still super responsive, but at the same time doesn't want to destroy me instantly when my throttle control and also steering control aren't on their best level. Friends, we're finally done. What do you say about that? Hallelujah. I also uploaded this tune if you don't want to copy every single slider here, every single number. So you can download this from my name. But of course, feel free to adjust the tune so that it eventually fits to your driving style. And if you haven't seen my previous tuning tutorial, definitely check that out now. It's about the Ferrari FXX and S1 class all-wheel drive all-round beasts. I'm your favorite German potato. Thanks for watching. Cheers.